My name is JLove Calderon, and I'm a conscious media maker. I am a writer, so I have 5 books out. I started with That White Girl, which is my coming-of-age story, and then went into curriculum, into young women's empowerment, and I also deal a lot with white privilege.
White privilege is white people who have skin privilege, who have unearned benefits and advantages because of their skin color. For example, I might be able to get a better loan than somebody because of my skin color. I might not be shot in the back by a cop because of my skin color. I might not be followed in a store because of my skin color, right? Other people, black and brown people, all the time, every single day, are assaulted by a barrage of things that happen to them purely because they're black and brown.
For me, it's about really talking about some of the taboo subjects that Americans do not want to talk about, which a lot of it includes race and white supremacy and white privilege, and really shining a light on racial injustice so we can all fight together for racial justice.
The principal question, what does it mean to be a white person? One of the people that you have in the book here, Timothy Wise, who's been with us repeatedly, he writes, this is from, it's titled A Love Letter to White America. No, seriously, this is on page 52, where he says, to be accused of hating white people just because you speak out against white privilege and white racism. I mean, think it through with me. If being against white racism makes a person anti-white, then doesn't that mean that racism is like the essence of being white? Doesn't it mean that being pro-white racism is somehow the only way to show your love for white people? Doesn't it mean that white people and racism are pretty much synonymous? I will stop there, but he goes on, and I would say that really gets right to the crux. And I had such a laugh in reading that, because that was a major bone of contention when he was on the program, when I was saying the interesting thing, just paying attention to words and the way that he uses language. These are all questions. He's not making statements and saying, yes, being white is synonymous with being racist. That's what it means to be a white person, to be racist. These are all questions that are being posed in a rhetorical manner, which I think is a very skilled, in my opinion, might even be a deliberate and deceptive act of racism, as opposed to just going ahead and saying that, yes, that's what it is to be truthful about things. I contend being white means to be racist. That's really what that identity comes down to. It's not about skin color. It's about, hey, a way of thinking, a code of conduct, a way of thought, speech, and action as it relates to people you all classify as not white. And that if anybody is confused about that, it's non-white people. White people are not confused about that at all, which I think totally contradicts what you're saying about there being a significant chunk of white people who somehow don't understand this, or who are unconscious about all this, or ignorant about all this. Do you want to respond to that?
Sure. Well, I think that I do agree with Tim Wise's love letter, because I think, the point is that all white people do not actively dislike or hate or fear people of color. And I believe the vast majority of white people who are, quote-unquote, the problem are the white people who are not educated and who have been socialized and conditioned to carry out a system that they don't understand they're part of, that they're pawns in a system. And that is the group of people that I feel like I'm called to do work around white privilege with. Because I don't believe being white is synonymous to being racist, although I do believe that white people are conditioned from the day that they are born to be racist. But I don't equate white people with racism. And in my opinion, what's happened is the lie of white supremacy has deeply impacted both people of color and white people, because we've all been taught lies upon lies upon lies. And people of color have been taught through conditioning and education in every institution that exists the inferiority complex, and white people have been taught through education in all of our institutions a complex of racial superiority. And in my opinion, what needs to happen, and this is what the white anti-racist movement is all about, is creating more spaces where we can start to decolonize the minds of white folks who have been socialized to play a part in a system of racial domination.
What does it mean to be a white person?
Well, what it means for me now, personally, is I was really impacted by the work of Cameron Levine from AWARE LA, which is a white anti-racist organizing group in LA. He created a model that's in my book called the White Radical Identity Model.
Hang on a second. Hang on 1 second.
Sure.
I want to hop in here because, in my opinion, that's deviating. That is a very different term, the radical white identity. Just what does it mean to be a white person? If you want to explain the radical white identity down the road, that's fine, and I actually have that highlighted as well to get to that. But just plain question, what does it mean to be a white person?
What does it mean to be a white person? Well, a white person is a human being that is walking on this planet that has white skin privilege. And so that's the kind of, everything that we interact with is different and unfairly privileging us because we're white. But we're still living a human being experience. And so, I think being a white person is navigating through the white skin privilege to get to what's true, which is liberation for all people. So what does that mean? That means that we have to work every day towards liberation so that we can deny the white skin privilege that we currently have based on our system of white supremacy.
Yeah, that bunkum is my word for 2013. I want to see how many times in different ways I can use that word throughout the year 2013. Bunkum. I would say that is what I just heard. It's just not accurate. It's what I said at the beginning of the program. It's white people just not willing to be honest about what it means to be white. And the whole white privilege, Dr. Peggy McIntosh has been here. It's just not honest. In fact, I was at a performance that was dealing with racism, white supremacy, and there was an individual on stage, and they had a projector on, and it was casting this image on the screen. There was a screen standing behind this individual, but he was standing in front of the screen. So the images from the projector, they were being displayed on the screen and on his physical body. And I said, that's such a great representation for the way that many of these white people who allege, like yourself, who allege to be quote-unquote anti-racist, somehow working against racism, that, hey, I just got this stuff. I was just born this way. I can't help it. I'm a white person. I've been conditioned this way. I got my knapsack with my compass and my thumbtacks and all this great stuff, and that is simply not accurate. And I've pointed out to many of our white guests, it would be absurd to the point of just being comical or just really tragic if you tried to make that assertion in 1960, which is not ancient history. 1965, you still had signs up saying white only. All of what you have been saying around what it means to be a white person, it would be total folly and recognized as such.
By the end of the 19th century, the southern states made it legal to offer so-called separate but equal services to their black citizens. These laws denied black Americans equal access to public amenities such as education and transport, turning the United States into a racially segregated nation. Soon, millions living in the land of the free found themselves trapped by the Jim Crow system, named after a vaudeville act that ridiculed black people.
So I just want to say that as a white woman, it took me a long time to understand about white privilege. Why? Because we're not taught about it. This is why I have to educate white people. Yeah. We are not taught about racism as white people.
How can you have white people saying they are just ignorant? I don't know what it means to be white. I don't understand any of this. When you got signs up everywhere for whites only, sundown towns, all of that. White people apparently were very conscious and thinking about what it means to be a white person, how they're supposed to function, the individuals they say are not white on a constant basis. You can't even go to the water fountain without monitoring and thinking about, wait a minute, I'm a white person. I need to be keeping an eye out, make sure that no non-white people are using our water fountain, using our restroom, eating a hamburger next to us. It would be recognized as total folly. And I think that is a major act of racism, white supremacy on the part of, I would say, all of you all. Timothy Wise, Dr. Peggy McIntosh, all of the white people that are in that collective, talking about so-called white privilege, and saying that that's what it means to be a white person, to have these privileges and what have you. Those quote-unquote privileges, they really come down to abusing individuals who are not white. That's how you got all the stuff in your knapsack to begin with, and the ability to not be abused, terrorized, degraded because you are a white person. That's really what it boils down to. You cannot disconnect the two, and I really think that it is a deliberate and disingenuous act when white people make, in my opinion, I could be incorrect, a conscious effort to disconnect being white from being racist. Does that make sense?
Well, I'm listening to you really hard, and I hear what you're saying. I totally hear what you're saying. I think what's hard for me, Gus, is when you say things like I'm not being truthful and I'm not being honest, because, I mean, I have no reason to come onto your program and lie. I mean, I think I don't agree with everything you're saying, and I'm trying to answer the question the way that I believe it to be true. I'm not going to sit up here and lie,
Okay.
I have to tell you what I believe, because if I told you what I think you want to hear, then I'd be lying. So I can only share with you based on the current knowledge that I have and my life experiences. I can only answer you as thoughtfully and honestly as humanly possible, and recognizing that, there are areas that you might have, more knowledge than I do. But that doesn't mean I'm dishonest. And I guess that's what's a little challenging for me in the conversation, is I feel like you're calling me dishonest, and I don't really feel like that's cool, but, it's your show. But I'm just saying I'm not going to come on your program and lie. That makes no sense to me. There's no point to that.
Okay.
So I hear you.
That's a major. Totally. I want to hop in right there, because this is very important. And as I said, I emailed you. I told you I want you to stand your ground. I don't want you to say things that you think I want to hear. I don't want you to say things and misrepresent yourself to our audience. I want you to go ahead and be as honest as you possibly can. However, as I've said, and I've told many of the white guests who've been on our program, when I believe that they could be lying, and that's generally the way that I phrase it. I don't make it a declaration because I don't know. I'm not in your head. But I frequently have a suspicion that white people could be lying when they speak to non-white people, because you all, white people collectively, do have a long history of not being honest when you speak with non-white people. Is that true?
That is true.
Okay, then. So does it make logical sense? Hang on. Does it make sense for a non-white person to have suspicion that if they're talking to a white person, especially if they're talking to a white person about racism, that white person could be lying? Does that make sense?
If we wanted to follow your logic, it could make sense that I'm coming on your program and lying.
Well, you just said it's not following my logic. You just agreed. White people, I mean, the evidence is about. See, this is what I mean. It shouldn't be this difficult. It should be honest. White people should be totally willing to acknowledge
you don't have a reason to trust me.
Can you finish? Can I allow me to finish?
You don't have a reason to trust me.
Thank you. That's in your book. One of your authors says that there's really no reason for non-white people to think white people are going to be sincere about ending this. I mean, that's in your book. I mean, it's just like, come on. Let's be real about this. Let's be truthful. I'm down to be courteous and listen to you explain things. But I mean, we got to stand your ground, and we got to be as honest as we possibly can. It is undeniable. White people worldwide have a history of lying to non-white people. That is indisputable.
You ever find that black people, especially black women, do you think they're somewhat suspicious of you?
Yes, I do, and I think most people of color are suspicious of me, and they have every right to be, because white people have historically lied from the beginning of time. Lied, stolen, exploited, and taken things that were not theirs. So that's part of, unfortunately, that's part of my ancestry.
Or even to have to take, I think we've been on this particular aspect of the conversation for 2 minutes. In my opinion, that is disgraceful that that's even challenged. It should be yes, of course.
I did not challenge
But you, yes, you did.
I said,
You proceeded.
I totally agree.
Let me finish my point, because when I proceeded to the next question and said, okay, you as a white person, and you, when you first began, hey, let me make sure that I'm being honest and clear here. I am a white person. I am a part of that collective of terrorism worldwide against non-white people. If that's true, then hey, I am a part of that legacy of dishonesty against non-white people. I cannot disconnect myself from that, and non-white people should keep that in mind. Hey, these people have a history of not being truthful with us, especially when it comes down to honestly dealing with white supremacy racism. All of this under the rubric of what does it mean to be a white person? Just that dialogue in and of itself. In my opinion, it's not honest, and you're not revealing the full truth to just say that I got this knapsack. You're not really getting to the essence of how you got your knapsack of privilege in the first place and how you maintain that knapsack of quote unquote privilege. It is inextricably connected to white people terrorizing, deceiving, murdering non-white people worldwide. And then, in my opinion, that's undeniable and self-evident. If I'm saying anything that is foolish, doesn't make sense, if you have studied this and it contradicts what you understand, let me know.
No, I agree with you.
Context of white supremacy. You as a white woman have come on this program and agreed to chat it up with us. What would be your motivation to deceive us? And in my view, just for any of the non-white listeners out there who might say, oh, Mrs. Calderon, she made a valid point there. I would say for white people, it is always in their interest to have non-white people think the way that they want them to think. That would be in the best interest of maintaining racism, white supremacy. And one of the things that I've seen that is consistent amongst white people who allege to be against racism, white supremacy. I've seen this consistently, Timothy Wise and many others, when they are challenged by non-white people and saying, hey, some of the things that you're saying, they're not accurate. What you're saying is not truthful, or it's not accurate, or whatever the case may be. I don't agree. It doesn't make sense. Maybe this should be changed. Maybe we should revisit the way you're presenting this, what you're saying, what you're writing. I've seen consistently where these white people have a vested interest in marketing, getting across their particular point of view so that the victims of racism do not get an accurate understanding of what it means to be a white person, don't get an accurate understanding of how the system of racism, white supremacy works. So I could see where a white person, they would have a vested interest, even if it means being deceptive or whatever they need to do with regards to using words in a skillful manner so that non-white people accept their point of view, accept their worldview about racism, white supremacy, as opposed to a worldview that would be more honest and may help non-white people to erode that system of racism, white supremacy, and the quote-unquote privilege that you got as a white person. So that right there, in my opinion, would be a reason why you might be motivated to be deceptive. Does that make sense?
I think it makes sense on a macro level in terms of the system. You know, I think, yes, there are people that do that, and all I can say is I'm not trying to do that, and I just, that's all I can tell you. Are there people that do that? Yes, I'm sure that the people that are conscious of using white supremacy to maintain their power and control are absolutely working hard at continuing to deceive people, including white people. yes, that is happening absolutely. And I personally am doing my very best not to be untruthful. Well, actually, it's not even my very best. I'm not going to be untruthful. I'm not going to be deceptive, because what I'm working to do is dismantle white supremacy. So all I can do is say that to you and do the best that I absolutely can during this show.
Okay, right on. Paying attention to words, that is a double negative. I'm not going to be untruthful. That is a double negative. I point things like that out because I do have a psychology major. I would say I think they call those Freudian slips when the message is not presented in the clearest possible manner. I think that could be, maybe it's conscious, maybe it's unconscious, maybe it's both. But whatever the case, whatever the case, it is a double.
Can I just say one quick thing?
That is a double negative. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So I think what I'm working on in this conversation with you is you're because you are so particular about concise words and everything like that, and I want to give you, I want to be concise and everything. So what's happening is it's like I'm really trying to be clear and concise and thoughtful, but I'm a little bit like watching my own words because of the kind of the context of the interview, and so it's like I'm not my usual kind of easygoing self right now, because I'm really listening hard to you, and I'm really trying to work hard to give you not what you want, meaning in terms of the context, but in how I say things, because I'm trying to make sure that I'm being as accurate as possible. So I'm that's why I'm not flowing as easygoing as I usually am in conversations like these.
Okay.
It's not an excuse, it's just the truth.
Okay. No, I appreciate you sharing. I think one of our guests from a few years back, she was a white woman, and she was doing research on conversations on racism, white supremacy, and her research, she's at Columbia, her research, she was saying that when you get white people in conversations where they're dealing with racism, when they're talking to a non-white person, it takes a little bit more energy to monitor what they're saying so that they don't say something that could be perceived as racist or say something that just flat out is racist, and that sometimes it takes so much energy that they might have slips where it'll come out other ways. That's Dana Carey, that's her name, Columbia University white woman. She was on the program April of 2010, and I think other white people have come on who have referenced similar research about how it takes more, exactly what you just said, it takes more energy to monitor what you're saying and what have you, and sometimes you have slips.
Well, thank you for being down. I have no further questions.
Right on. Thank you, Mrs. Calderon, for hanging in, asking questions. Some folks, they missed out, but maybe we can have you back on the program to give the folks who didn't get a chance to get their questions in, give them opportunity to share their views and get some questions in. I didn't even get to touch on some of the other comments I had from the book. The website, you all can check it out. It's linked in the broadcast. Several books we've been discussing, mostly Occupying Privilege, Conversations on Love, Race, and Liberation. Very provoking conversation. I will continue to marinate on what we have discussed. Thank you again for sharing some of your Tuesday evening with us.
Thank you, Gus. I appreciate the opportunity.
For sure. Have you, just before, this is a yes-no, have you read Neely Fuller Jr.'s book, The United Independent Compensatory Code?
I haven't.
Oh, okay. Cool beans. Just wanted to get that before you signed off. Again,
okay.
Our guest, JLove Calderon, thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Okay. Thanks, Gus. Have a beautiful evening.
For sure.
Okay. Bye.
Context of white supremacy.
I just want to say it's clear, like Mr. Fuller says, or the sound clip, Gus, that you play, if there's anyone who does not understand racism, white supremacy, it is black people, because anytime that you can have a person who says, yes, I am a racist, I practice racism, white supremacy, and then say, and I have a ton of black friends, it is clear that black people do not understand what racism, white supremacy is. I can't imagine so-called Jews sitting around and having someone say, yep, I'm a Nazi, and I'm going to complete the job, and so on and so forth, and Jewish people sit around and say, we are friends. You know, it is so sad that racism, white supremacy is just not understood. That you can have a practitioner of it, a maintenance worker of it, in your midst, in your bed, and you not think anything of it.
Me having personally encountered her in person on a number of occasions, and most recently it was back in October of last year, 2012, at a writers' conference in Brooklyn.
JLove Calderon, as she puts it in her bio, she is a white woman who is also an author, an activist, film and TV producer, and social entrepreneur working on issues of social justice, race, and gender. She's authored 4 books, including That White Girl, which has been optioned for a film, and won numerous awards for activism on behalf of peace and liberation for all people. She is also at work she's finished her latest book, Occupying Privilege, Conversations on Love, Race, and Liberation, that will be self-published by JLove.
I know a number of people who know her, 2 people in particular who have worked with her at conferences, at seminars, and I'm not saying their opinion of her is, that she's a racist white supremacist, but I'm saying that I know people who do know her, and having personally observed her, I recognize that when she is in a room of other victims, of non-white people, they are in absolute awe of her.
I'm just amazed. I'm hearing what you're saying, and just to hear it, I mean, we can easily sit here and say these, but to hear it coming out of your mouth, I think it's very courageous. And I think and I'm stepping outside of myself and saying, as another white person listening to what you're saying, if you were saying that to me, how would I respond? Probably, if I wasn't ready to accept, go, what's wrong with you?
You can't talk to JLove.
And that's your mouth. And the funny thing is, I think it's all divine because, in hip-hop culture, you're usually given a name. So I was given the name JLove. And I think it's divine that love is in there because I love love, and I love people, and I love justice.
Okay, one more question I wanted to ask. It seems like you really embrace, I'll say, black culture right now. Do you consider yourself at one point that you're a black woman trapped in a white person's body? And second part to that, if you don't, you once upon a time, did you?
I never thought of it in those terms. I think that I did feel like a prisoner trapped in white skin. Because I felt like, when I was down with hip hop when it wasn't popular, and I would go to hip hop jams and everything, what was hard for me was, what was hard was what black and brown people have to face every single day, which is I'd walk into a jam and people judge me by my color. Right. And within hip hop culture in the 80s, it was not appreciated that I was up in the cypher. So what was hard for me is that I had to prove myself, prove that I was down, prove that I had authentic feelings, that I was not about trying to exploit the culture but be part of it, and I had to fight through the white skin to get people to accept me.
Well, I hear you. I don't see the black trapped in white. I just see a white woman.
Well, I was asking her just, once upon a time.
Right. No, but I say that to say I really like the fact that I just see you as someone, and I could have seen that once upon a time, but I see you now, who you are now, as someone who just acknowledges her privileges as white, but who's comfortable in her skin,
that's
but comfortable
wonderful.
enough to say,
refreshing.
which is great because you're not trying to be something that you're not.
But you wouldn't have liked me when I was in college.
I would have, because you would have been with the braids.
I had the braids.
Oh, God.
I was the white girl you love to hate. It's true. I mean, because I was ignorant. But I want to ask you. I embraced black culture to the fact that, like, I was Afrocentric in my own way. You can call me crazy, but I was. So I was somebody that I would have gotten on your nerves.
Okay.
Because
Were you more Afrocentric than some of the other Afrocentric people?
I was, because I had to prove myself.
I understand.
Particularly because she is a so-called white female who is of the hip-hop generation. And I find that individuals who come in that aesthetic are the most skillful because they're able to be around victims on a day-to-day basis, whether they're sitting around playing video games, freestyling over rap music, or smoking weed. They pick up the nuances of other victims, and they become very, very skillful and crafty. And because these victims really want to identify with having an individual who is of the so-called oppressive class in their midst, they just give them such a pass. And I think, in my opinion, that an individual that is doing the work that she says that she is doing is a lot more dangerous than a Tim Wise, because a lot of younger people will more likely not listen to a Tim Wise because they'll see him as not cool, not someone that they could relate to. They would see him as a middle-aged white guy. But for them to see a white female coming amongst them, speaking in hip-hop vernacular as she was doing on this show, although no one was using that sort of dialogue, I think that it is very, very destructive and detrimental, particularly to young people.
Very important points everyone touched on. Thank you all for the honesty. The folks that dialed in to share, appreciate the honesty. We are all victims and still struggling. Zach Casey, I would share that I thought of Zach Casey frequently when I was reading her book, which was repugnant, loathsome, it was heinous, oh Lord. The wording and the verbiage that she used on the program, it's dripping off the pages. And then I had to read Timothy Wise and Peggy McIntosh. Dr. Eddie Moore Jr. did a review giving her some kudos for the book. It was, oh man, it was, my stomach hurt having to sift through it. But at any rate, I thought of Zach Casey repeatedly. He is an admitted racist. I met him at the White Privilege Conference, and he was a guest on the program in April of 2010. And he said some of these people were there at the conference, and so we were seeing these people. And Ariel Lucky, she quotes him in the book, some suspected racist white man. And he was giving one of the keynote presentations, and I didn't even want to go see him because I was just like, I can only tolerate so much of this nonsense of these white people gallivanting around pretending to not be racist. And he went to the dialogue. Mr. Casey, he admitted to being a racist. He was at least trying to keep it somewhat real about what it means to be white. Anyway, he goes to see Ariel Lucky, and he comes back, and he's just cracking up laughing like, man, every time I see these white people, it just reinforces what I've been saying, because we sat and talked for like 2 hours, and we talked about this on the program when he was a guest. He said, every time I see these people, it just reinforces what we were talking about and saying the impossibility of positive white identity, and that just is a nice turn to fit to mean it is impossible to have white people that are not racist. He was saying just seeing these people get up and give their performances and sing about white privilege and dance and step and talk about what they're doing and this, that, and the other, it just further evidences white people are all about racism, white supremacy, every day, all day, to infinity. I would highly encourage listeners, check out that broadcast with Zach Casey. He was, even white children, giving nobody passes, not giving himself one. He is an admitted racist, so keep that in mind. But I was reminded of that broadcast frequently while listening to and reading her book, unfortunately. Anywho, we'll see if we can get her back on the broadcast. I was so sad when I heard, when I was reading the interview that she was doing in the book with M1 from Dead Press and Talib Kweli. They're victims, but just seeing that confusion,
Maybe feeling a little bit of chaos, despair is what's in the air right now. And we are here to say that we are brilliant, resilient, powerful.
The opportunity we have ahead of us is incredible.
We believe that no one is free until we are all free.
It's on us to take it by our own two hands and fashion the future that we all need to see together.
I know you think you've heard this before, but it's different now. What's different? There's more at stake.
Where they think of her as a buddy and a pal, and JLove is cool. I'll wrap up, I guess, just saying this. JLove, you can see her photograph. She does not look like Dr. Peggy McIntosh and some of these wrinkled up white people.
And I'd be a white person, a lesbian, and a southerner.
JLove and M1.
Working on having a consciousness for all the people on the planet.
A lot of non-white people would say, oh, that's an attractive white woman. She would mop up if you put her in an environment and you make an effort to critique. Like if this happened in a setting with a lot of black people, we would have been stoned, tarred, feathered.
Go ahead. When you were hanging out with the Crips and so forth, I know not only we were calling you that white girl, but what were white people calling you?
Well, here's the interesting thing. Remember I told you I had a double life.
Right.
So I had a lot of crews. And I was not just kicking it with the Crips. I was on the basketball team. I was on the tennis team.
Wow.
I was on the volleyball team.
You were.
I had heavy metal friends.
So nobody can mess with her because she had backup.
Well, and You're right, Sean, because here's the thing. No matter where I went, you really couldn't mess with me because I was down with most people. And part of it was just, I love people. I love people. I love, I'm not a cliquey type of person. Like I love to find the beauty in each person. And so I was a chameleon.
I was just going to say that word, chameleon.
Yeah.
But you know what? I spy. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can see that, and what I admire most about when you get on, because I know you go around and you talk about white privilege, and this is something that you don't often see. Actually, I can't recall a time when I've seen a white person get up and say, we have privilege as white people. I've never heard that before.
Kicked out, beaten, the whole nine by black people. It would have been horrible. I have said consistently, it's most of the time when I started out, it was young white males doing this sort of thing where they were on their anti-racism. And I was saying then, if they ever get some young white females that are attractive.
So you do organizing work, and I'd love for you to share what that is and how you personally do it, even if it's on like a timeline, your origin story. How did you start? What did it look like before? What does it look like now?
Sure. Well, my origin story is the first time I organized, it was as a gangbanger. I was the first white girl in the Rollin' 30 Crips, which is a black gang in, throughout LA, mostly West Coast. Have you heard about the Crips and the Bloods?
Yep.
Game will be over. Unless there's some black females there to push back and say, no, they're not down. This is going to be a wrap. It will be done. No one will be suspicious of them. They will, taking candy from a mentally retarded baby would really be more accurate.
Dangerous.
We will be back on Thursday. Extremely lethal. And she's married to a victim. Man, oh my God, she would have her little non-white children there. Woo!
So I just want to say that as a white woman, it took me a long time to understand about white privilege. Why? Because we're not taught about it. This is why I have to educate white people. We are not taught about racism as white people.